I worked some years ago for an old lady who had Alzheimer's in the last years of her life, and I was very privileged to work in her garden. And she was a wonderful lady, hugely well supported by her daughters, and so she was able to carry on living at home. And she had a lovely garden, and was so pleased I was looking after it for her. And she'd come out into the garden quite regularly, just for maybe 5 or 10 minutes, and I'd show her what I was doing, explain what I was doing, show her the things that were in flower at any given point. And she'd obviously cared very deeply for her garden, and still did. And although she wasn't able to do what she had been used to doing, she really took a great deal of joy in coming out and seeing how I was developing it. But one wonderful small adventure, if you like, was she had a plum tree against the side of the house, and so I was physically looking after it and pruning it and gardening it. But she came out with one of her daughters and a granddaughter and picked all the plums one day, and they went and made plum jam. And again, so a deal of that activity was inside, but certainly she took such joy out of coming out and harvesting this fruit just grown right by her house, and a simple activity, but it was so joyful for her to come and get that harvest, even in her difficulties and in old age. She was able to do that with some help, and then made that jam, and I was even given a jar of it myself to take home.
Well, for those of you who have just joined us, you've caught us on another Facebook Live session, and we're really going to be looking at gardens and getting outdoors and the benefits for people living with dementia of getting outdoors as well. So thank you very much for joining us. I've got two fantastic guests with me again this time. I've got James from Another Place, which is a unique hotel collection known for its relaxed, adventurous vibe, and my colleague Gordon, who works with me here at Dementia Adventure. So we're really looking forward to chatting about some exciting ideas and experiences. Now, do pop any questions or any chats that you might have, and we will try to address those as we go through to today's session. So I'm going to start, first of all, by doing a couple of introductions. James, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, good afternoon. So I'm James Cox, head gardener at Another Place, the lake, up in beautiful Cumbria. We've got Ullswater just at the bottom of the garden here, so we're very blessed, and it's even been sunny today, so we've been enjoying it. And I've been at Another Place as head gardener for about 3.5 years. Originally, I came up from Chester, and I have a wife who works in the restaurants here and 4 children. So I'm a busy man.
Busy, brilliant. Thanks ever so much for joining us today. And Gordon,
No
will you introduce yourself for those who haven't seen you before on our other training?
Thanks, Ruth. Yeah, my name's Gordon, and I'm the Dementia Training and Partnership Manager for Dementia Adventure. I'm also have a grand title of Adventure Leader, so I'm very fortunate to be able to lead on certain supported breaks that are run by Dementia Adventure, and I'm fortunate to run the supported breaks that are delivered in the Lake District. So I get to explore James's part of the countryside and actually do some wonderful work up there. So yeah, that's my role.
Brilliant, thank you. So before we get started, just a little bit of housekeeping to do. As mentioned, please use the comments box in the chat function to ask any question or leave any comments. Any advice and tips also greatly appreciated. If there is any questions, we will do our absolute best to address those while we're online. But if not, we will come back to you individually after today's session as well. As always, I'd just like to do a quick shout out to Right at Home, who are sponsoring our Unpacking Dementia series and are really making this possible. So a big thanks to them. So now we've got our guests with us. Let's talk about what today's session is all about. With spring in full swing, it's turning our attention to the outdoors and the amazing opportunity that this season brings. I must admit, it is a personal favourite of mine, seeing all those new things come to life in the greenery after the dullness of winter sometimes. So today we're going to be talking about things like sensory walks, reconnection with nature in your own garden and enjoying local parks, because it can be some real simple outdoor activities from picnics to casual meetups that can really support lifting the spirit, which can really, really support the mental well-being of people living with dementia that we're supporting. We're also going to explore how gardening and community allotments can offer a real sense of joy and connection, and we're going to share some practical tips, for making these experiences dementia exclusive. I'm losing my words already. So without further ado, I'm going to start with you, Gordon, and tell us why the outdoors. What are these benefits we're talking about, particularly for people living with dementia?
Well, when people get a diagnosis of dementia, often their world starts to shrink a little. They stop doing the things that they used to do, and they become increasingly anxious about their skills and abilities sometimes. And so connecting with nature is really important because what it does is enables people to almost leave their dementia behind. The people that we work with at Dementia Adventure tell us time and time again because they're struggling sometimes with, memory difficulties or sensory impairments that when they're outdoors, they can just be in the moment rather than dealing with lots of questions and finding information. They can just reflect on what they see, what they feel, what they touch. And actually, the research that we've undertaken at Dementia Adventure with Natural England has identified there's a wealth of health and well-being benefits from getting outdoors. We know from the pandemic that it's good for all of us, but for people with dementia, particularly, who sometimes start to experiences periods of depression or anxiety, that being outdoors is a great mood boost. It's a great relaxer, and it gives us the opportunity to just be in the moment and to actually connect with some of the fondest memories we've had in our childhood.
And you know, Gordon, I'm going to jump in there because Samuel's asked an amazing question. So he's asked, can regular outdoor time help slow cognitive decline, or is it more about that quality of life in the moment? And I think for us, this is something that's really prevalent, isn't it? Because we know we're lucky we have an understanding of how the brain works and how dementia can impact that. But what we also know is that actually when the brain's active and busy, it can help slow that progression down a little, can't it? And I'm right in thinking that when we start to get outdoors, our brain is much, much busier. Is that correct?
Yeah, because obviously dementia is affecting the neurons in our brain, so the memory stores, if you like, and those connections between those memory stores. And it's gradually destroying those and breaking those down. So what we need to do is be keeping those as active as we possibly can. Now, when we're doing a task, obviously they're active, but when we're outdoors, because it's a multi-sensory environment, we're actually lighting up and using all parts of the brain. So just without us knowing, by walking, by experiencing, by being out in the environment, all parts of the brain are lit up. So it keeps it active, it's exercising those neurons. And also we're learning new things often and learning from new experiences. Because rather than if we can keep our brain as active as possible for as long as possible, we can slow the deterioration of that disease.
Amazing. James, I'm going to bring you in here because you're out there living this, you are out in the garden all day, every day. Have you had experiences where you've really seen that positive impact of people getting outdoors and that connection with nature?
I definitely have, absolutely, Ruth. And again, I was enjoying listening to what Gordon said there, and again chuckling because he's saying so many things that again I agree with and go, of course, yes, that's what happens all the time. And again, when we get outside, we sort of get out of ourselves to some extent, and particularly when you're facing cognitive impairments and cognitive decline, to get outside, get out of yourself, to be distracted by other things, and to, as you say, focus and keep the brain busy with looking at the things around you, the stimulants, whether that's flowers and shrubs and trees and animals and nature as well. It's just massively helpful. And I think being outdoors is great for anyone. I work outdoors all the time. I'm extremely lucky in that regard. But again, I see a huge amount of nature, and it never fails to occupy the mind and make you think about things. As I said, it brings you out of yourself, out of your own sort of problems of the moment, and it gives you something else to focus on. And
I think what
certainly,
I love about it as well is that you don't need to have a huge knowledge around nature. I mean, as James has discovered already, my knowledge around gardening is fairly minimal. But actually, when you're with somebody, you can share that or you can ask questions. It doesn't require that factual recall all the time. It doesn't need a specific topic. It can be as vague or as detailed as actually what's comfortable for the people we're working with, can't it?
oh, absolutely. And again, it's a lot about observation. So just getting outside and looking at what's around you. It might just be a walk into your garden. It might be wandering down to the park or wandering through town just outside your front door and just seeing what you can spot. And just over the last 2 days, I've seen honeybees in the garden landing on a shed door, and I've observed a bird up in the eaves of a building taking a worm to a chick. And again, just looking around and seeing these things, and yeah, as I said, it makes you think about sort of what else is going on in this world, and it's so much bigger than us. And I think sometimes that's overwhelming, but sometimes it really helps to focus on other things going on around you, and particularly that beautiful, creative sort of natural environment and those birds and beasts as well.
Absolutely. But I think what's also important to remember is, easy outdoor activities, because actually I'm very aware when I'm doing a lot of the work that I do with our carers, you're up against it. Supporting somebody living with dementia is hard, it's exhausting. And often when we talk about going outdoors, we talk about the great outdoors, don't we? And we picture these big adventures, hiking up hills, rock climbing, that's that stereotypical pictures that you see aligned with that. But what I'd really like to focus on a little bit about is those adventures not having to be so big, and actually those benefits from those smaller adventures. Would you agree, Gordon?
Absolutely. I think obviously our name suggests dementia adventure. It's all about the large things and grand days out or experiences like holidays. Whereas we're all about the micro adventures, the things that we can do day to day that might just take a couple of minutes, but really do ground us. They connect us and they just bring us so much joy. So it might be that we're just actually stepping out into the garden or walking out to a familiar place in our locality, because actually connecting with the outdoors, smelling the blossom, feeling the breeze on our skin, hearing the bird song, as James was talking about, it taps into our senses and it really does enliven us and actually create a great joy, which sometimes we forget that doing simple things makes such a huge difference.
And I know we often use the term, and James, this will be one you're familiar with. We talk about doing sensory walks, but what does that actually mean? What does that look like? And what are the benefits of those?
Well, certainly, if I give you a quick example again, which again referring back to your question about seeing positive differences in people's lives, I worked some years ago for an old lady who had Alzheimer's in the last years of her life, and I was very privileged to work in her garden, and she was a wonderful lady, hugely well supported by her daughters, and so she was able to carry on living at home. And she had a lovely garden, and was so pleased I was looking after it for her. She'd come out into the garden quite regularly, just for maybe 5 or 10 minutes, and I'd show her what I was doing, explain what I was doing, show her the things that were in flower at any given point. And she'd obviously cared very deeply for her garden and still did. And although she wasn't able to do what she had been used to doing, she really took a great deal of joy in coming out and seeing how I was developing it. But one wonderful small adventure, if you like, was she had a plum tree against the side of the house, and so I was physically looking after it and pruning it and gardening it. But she came out with one of her daughters and a granddaughter and picked all the plums one day, and they went and made plum jam. And again, so a deal of that activity was inside, but certainly she took such joy out of coming out and harvesting this fruit just grown right by her house, and a simple activity, but it was so joyful for her to come and get that harvest, even in her difficulties and in old age. She was able to do that with some help, and then made that jam, and I was even given a jar of it myself to take home. So I
Oh,
just
lovely, lovely. And we've
everybody.
had Janet in the chat. She's asked, do some sensory experiences outdoor tend to spark joy and memories more than others? So, for example, is the connection around smell or textures or sound more important? And I think my experience has been it's really individual, like that journey through dementia. I've worked with a gentleman who loved to touch plants and leaves, and would really notice the difference of how some felt furry and some were maybe sort of spiky, whatever. But equally, I think smell's a really common one, isn't it? We automatically smell like flowers such as roses and lavender. And so, I mean, certainly in my experience, I would say that it's about that person. What does that person love to do? But obviously, some of those sensory engagements are easier than others. Gordon, have you got any tips to sort of support that sensory engagement?
Yeah, I think it's being person-centered, because from my point of view and from our charities, we know that obviously memory recall for some people living with dementia as part of their dementia journey becomes difficult. And there's a part of the brain called the amygdala that obviously it stores our emotional attached memories. And some of our fondest memories are associated with being in the great outdoors. And because obviously there's so much to choose from, as James described, the range of things that we can experience, it just triggers things really, really easily. It becomes a natural part of reminiscence and connection rather than a contrived sort of having to plan or structure it, because we've got lots of things that we connect with. Herbs, for example, are a brilliant thing that we use all the time to connect with. One, if people even are indoors and find it difficult to get out, growing herbs, they're very, very simple to do. They're very quick to grow. They can then be transplanted outside to venture out to the great outdoors. But then utilizing them and actually thinking about the recipes and the things that actually, that the memories that are conjured up by using those particular herbs. Everybody's got stories of the way they use mint or lavender or basil or chives. And again, it's creating more meaning and purpose. It's not just one activity. It then moves into cooking and actually generating some familiar dishes that they used to enjoy together. So again, it's thinking about the person, what's special to them and for them, particularly in terms of childhood memories and experiences, and seeing whether we can actually use the outdoor opportunity to spark that.
And is this something you do, James, in the grounds that you work in? Do you have access to different areas that you can then use to sort of run these activities as well?
Yeah, so we're again very lucky here at another place, the lake. We have a kitchen garden, and again, I'm smiling as Gordon's talking about herbs. He's absolutely spot on. Herbs are just so easy to grow and reproduce and divide, and you can so easily make a lot out of herbs. And again, and the only other thing I was sort of thinking at that point was strawberries. And again, they're a plant that are very forgiving. It's very easy to grow. I'm sure you'd be all right with strawberries, Ruth. And you can again just create more and more strawberries just by taking the runners off the plants and replanting them. They basically divide and reproduce themselves extremely easily. And again, strawberries really seem to link back to early memories as well. I think certainly one of my early memories is eating strawberries as a child and pick your owns and things like that. And I think that really sparks for people when they come across ripe strawberries in a garden. And so at another place, we have about 4 strawberry patches. I've been expanding those every year. The chefs here really enjoy utilizing that produce as well, which is wonderful. But certainly people can wander around our gardens, particularly, and into the veg garden as well. And I'm always very happy to talk to people at great length about what vegetables we're growing. And again, people love having their knowledge expanded. They ask questions, and myself and my colleagues love to answer where we can and tell people about, again, as Gordon was saying, what you can do with herbs and vegetables, the ones that we grow, things that other people might try. And quite frequently people say, oh, well, I've only got a small garden, I've only got a small window box or a pot. And I always say, oh, no, that's no problem. Again, things like herbs, strawberries, small salad leaves and lettuce, very easy to grow in small containers. And it's such a wonderful thing. Again, it takes you back to childhood a lot, your first plant, your first experience of growing. And it's such a good thing to do. Again, you'll have to stop me from going on about how wonderful it is to grow
I
things
think
at
one of the
home.
things that I've noticed as well, and just on a personal level, actually, it really helps promote that sense of community and inclusion. So when I moved to where I am now, we inherited a pear tree. I'm not a lover of pears. I'm really sorry to all of you out there who loves pears. I know it's a Marmite thing, but actually I've got a friend of mine who lives locally and she just loves planting. So has planted this array of vegetables, and just she doesn't eat a lot of the veg. So we at the moment have a brilliant swap agreed that I will give her the pears because my tree's looking brilliant and laden this year. And she's going to give me lots of courgettes and aubergines because I absolutely love making a vegetable chili. So again, it's finding out, there's often on small village Facebook groups posts about, I've got a few spare tomato plants, anybody want them? And I think it's a really lovely way to network. And actually for people living with dementia, that can become really important as well, because building those bonds within that local community and networking like that can be absolutely fantastic. Again, though, looking at it slightly differently, getting outdoors for a picnic, there's absolutely some key benefits there. And, how would you give us some tips about doing that, Gordon?
Again, I think we're in the perfect time of year where the weather is starting to brighten up. And obviously, things that we're used to doing indoors, we can start taking outdoors. So it can be a picnic in the park and just sort of making that opportunity a little bit special, because lots of us have favorite beauty spots, or there's a particular or place that maybe isn't too far that actually conjures up childhood memories of going out with family or friends. And I think going to those places and seeing them change across the year is really important. And taking a picnic is a lovely way of doing that and just experiencing the benefits from a different environment. I think.
And I'd love to jump in there and just mention actually our sponsors right at home are running a group of organised picnics, aren't they? And I think that's, they've been able to see the benefits of that, getting out into the garden with people bringing different items of food to share amongst themselves. So building yet again that community, but they're also doing that, to support their movement across, people who are working with them. So it's a really lovely way to be able to get to know people, but include people at all levels as well, whether that's from making the sandwiches, picking the herbs, regardless, I think it's a really lovely way to be able to build that, isn't it? So,
Absolutely. Oh,
go on,
sorry.
go
No,
on.
no, just because the sharing of food and the sharing of those food stories, evokes so much reminiscence and connection too. So again, just a wealth of opportunities. But for people who maybe can't venture out, maybe don't have the mobility or the access, again, we're a great advocate for anything you do indoors. Take your breakfast outside, take your cup of coffee outside, because when we're talking about the health and well-being benefits, people don't have to be outside for a significant period of time. Just 15 minutes helps
Mm.
to, improve mood, actually, can stimulate appetite, can also help with our sleeping and eating patterns, for the rest of the day. So again, sometimes the small things are the things that can make a huge difference.
And again, I just want to spend a little bit of time talking about gardening and allotments, and not just as hobbies. I think, a lot of people assume that to have an allotment is just something you do if that's your passion, but actually they can be really meaningful as therapeutic activities. So James, I'm going to come to you with that one. Is that something you've seen the benefits of and something you've done before?
Absolutely, Ruth. Again, it's there's a lot I can say on it. It's an area that I think we're still learning about just how beneficial it is being outdoors for our mental health, cognitive ability, and all sorts of things that we're still learning. But certainly, I've seen it for many years. I was somebody who was involved in a community garden back down in Chester. I'm was somebody who was involved in a charity down there. It was an educational charity, and they did outreach and activities for young people largely. I mean, there were people of all ages, but a lot of
Yeah.
young people. And I helped set up a small garden in a derelict backyard in the middle of Chester. And it was an ideal opportunity for the young people to get involved, literally clearing up the garden, helping to start putting together planting beds and things like that. But there was so much practical sort of work they could do, and that really seemed to help some of them, particularly. Again, some of these young people, they had many difficulties in their lives for one reason or another. And again, in speaking with some of the young lads, particularly who stuck out this garden project for some months and even a year or two, they said, yeah, they felt it was helping them, even as they were removing rubbish or sort of digging soil. It was helping them work through things in their own lives. And so
Yeah.
that
And
was
it's
something that, again, I really
creating
enjoyed
that
to hear.
for them as well, isn't it?
Hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think sometimes that often leads us on to intergenerational conversations as well. I've seen some beautiful conversations between, my family members from my younger children through to my own parents, talking about things in the garden, things they've grown together, and it sparks that interest, that conversation at all levels, which again is just absolutely amazing. So I'm going to come on to really one of our last sections about making the outdoors more dementia inclusive. And Gordon, I'm going to start with you about how can we do that? Are there little tips and tricks that you've got for making outdoor activities more inclusive and easier for carers to do at home?
Yeah, I think it's keeping things simple. I think sometimes people often think that they have to do some sort of grand gesture, whereas obviously it's finding something that interests the person. James gave the example of strawberries. It could be runner beans, broad beans, whatever it is that actually, and you can start by planting things in your kitchen, having things on your windowsill, and then encouraging the person to sort of venture out. I think equipment, sometimes people find equipment hard to handle. So again, sometimes thinking of adaptive equipment, and there are now particular gardening tools that are much easier to grip and to utilize. But as I say, keeping things simple and making sure that the activity maybe is going to last, 15, 20 minutes, maybe half an hour maximum. So again, it's manageable. Somebody doesn't think it's going to be an exhausting event, because the more that you can have fun together by doing something small and simple, they're going to want to come back to it again and maybe develop it and have another go another time.
And I'm going to jump in here, James. I've got a question for you from Priya, who says she works in a residential home. What low cost or easily adaptable outdoor activities do you recommend?
Awesome. Well, that's a fantastic question because there's so many ways you can go with it. So she works in a residential home. Well,
Yeah.
again, I don't know exactly the layout of it, but I'm sure there'll be some space somewhere that maybe she could find to utilize for some planting. And again, just an example I've got from my own life recently. I was helping an elderly friend of mine who's in some sheltered accommodation, and they had a bit of lawn out the back, and she had asked the people who ran the place if she could have part of the lawn just a meter by a meter to put a little bed in, and they said she could, and so she got me to come around and do the physical work and the digging and what have you. But she was out there as well, and she did a little bit of sweeping up and handed me some plants. In fact, we picked the plants together that she wanted to put in, and she had a fantastic time and got this little meter by meter square going, and it brought a lot of people who wandered past a lot of joy as we put it together. And but it was very simple, so you can do
And
a
when it
little in a
comes to
lot.
cost, James, would you say that planting something from seed is a more cost-effective option, or is it about looking at different plants and their availability and time of year?
Well, again, definitely growing from some seed is very cost effective. It's again, a packet of seeds will be just a couple of quid maybe. Again, they're so freely available. But also these days you can order plug plants or little already grown little shrubs and plants off the internet very easily in small pots. And actually, it's fairly inexpensive to put together, again, a small herb garden or small vegetables and very simple things, just little salads and chives and spring onions, even tomatoes and things like that, in a very small space as well. So I'd say don't sort of think you just have to do it from seed. Again,
The
small
world is
pot
your
plants can
oyster.
be very cheap as well, but you can grow a lot in a small space. And again, people can be put off by the idea of having to dig and do all this work, but really, even just buying a few small pots of as I said, maybe a few pepper plants or tomato plants and putting them in a very small box bed area of waste ground, you can very quickly get a little sort of a raised bed going. And yeah, just doing things cheaply. Again, looking to people, neighbors, and friends who might have things they can lend you. Or again, when we talked earlier about dividing strawberries or dividing herbs and dividing plants, you can get a lot of things for free from people who already have them growing. So
Absolutely.
cost can be
And
a
really,
bar, but
really
it's not.
quickly, really quickly, Gordon, before we wrap up today's session, is there any resources out there that people can access, any links that we can share with people who've joined us today that can guide people to some really low cost, easy, accessible activities that will support people living with dementia?
Yeah, I mean, obviously there are organisations that run activities, so social farms and gardens, if people want to connect with their local therapeutic horticultural opportunities that might be in their area. But also there are organisations like Sense who also create a wealth of resource. We've actually created some dementia-friendly gardening information leaflets and information guides about how to sort of support people living with dementia to enjoy the garden and outdoor experiences. So I definitely point to those organisations to have a look.
Lovely. That's brilliant. Thank you. Well, it's been a fantastic session. I've certainly learned a lot. Now, what I will do is I will make sure the links to those resources we've just discussed will go out to you all so you can have a look at those. And I'm going to encourage each and every one of you, when you've got your gardens looking beautiful or with all this veg growing in it, do make yourself a picnic. A picnic lunch puts a smile on everybody's face, doesn't it? And we can just step outside. It really doesn't need to be a huge adventure when we're getting outdoors. So thank you to everybody who's joined us today. Gordon, James, thank you so much for your input. It's been absolutely amazing.
No
I've
problem.
learned an awful lot from you. Now, a recording of today's session will be available on our YouTube channel later on this week. And if you'd like to share that with those of you who aren't on Facebook, that would be great. If you have left a comment or a question in the chat, then we will absolutely get to that after today's session. We're sure that we answer that. So our next Facebook Live session is all about unpacking nutrition and hydration. And we believe at the moment that's happening on the 19th of May, which is Dementia Action Week. So do come along and join us.